Assalamu alaikum. Welcome to another Afghan Eye Live. I'm your host Sangar Paikar.
And I'm ahmed-waleed Kakar.
Guys, is the audio okay? Can you guys hear us well enough to be with us for the whole live stream? Yes, okay. Thank you very much, guys. It's been a while. So much has happened. The Panjshir resistance has collapsed. The Taliban have announced a new government. We have received a lot of questions. There's a lot to discuss, so we will try today to focus mainly on the new Taliban government. Who are the cabinet ministers? What do we know about this new Taliban government? And we will also discuss what the implications are of this caretaker government that has been announced today. But first, we have to talk about what happened yesterday and the day before yesterday. The
First, we actually need to do something else, Sangar. We need
yeah.
to tell everyone, because we always forget to do this, we need to tell everyone to like the video, right?
Yes, guys.
Um, Give it another 1 or 2 minutes. Get a couple of other people joining us. And for everyone here, once again, we are sorry that we've sort of taken a bit of a break. It hasn't really been a break. We've just both been extremely busy. Um, So we're sorry that we haven't been with you guys as much as we would have liked. However, in any case, may I ask everyone to, just as you found this video on social media, and Sangar is the spy master of the AFGHANEYE, he's our intelligence chief. So he knows that 60% of our viewers are actually people that are not subscribed to the channel. So if they're not subscribed to the channel, then we can make the inference that they didn't get a notification and they found out about us from somewhere else. So just as you found out about us on social media, so too can others. But in any case, Sangar, a lot has happened. Just before we get a couple of more likes and a couple of more people joining us, um, you know, how have you been the last few days? Not obviously, I would ask you on a personal level, obviously, but right now so much has happened that the personal wouldn't be able to, it would go overboard. So, how has the news been treating you um, over the last few days?
I would say exhausting. Okay.
Uh huh.
I am constantly uh, checking the news. Like if I'm at work, I work for an hour, and then in an hour time, in every half an hour, every 45 minutes, I have to see if there's any news. So I do that constantly. That has been the case for the last 20 years or so. But now it's really strange because you see so many things going on at the same time, and all the news streams are dominated by fake news, and not just fake news that you couldn't really figure out that it's fake, but like really preposterous things. And yes, so I feel like it's surrealistic. It's like almost being in a exaggerated version of reality where things are even more ridiculous than they used to be. I mean, we are used to seeing a lot of fake news, especially with regards to Afghanistan, but the last few days was like phenomenal, phenomenal. So
Yeah,
yeah.
I remember I was speaking to a friend the other day, right? And I've got a confession to make for everyone watching here. So I'm assuming you guys would not assume, right, that I would fall prey to this fake news, okay?
Yeah.
That I wouldn't believe it. But now here's the thing. It got to a level where at one stage I was like, when you look at yourself in the mirror and you're like, maybe I need to check my own biases. Maybe the problem is with me. It's not with anyone else. So this epiphany came about when we were talking about Panjshir. And at first it was like, the Pakistanis have airstriked Panjshir and it was kind of funny because of how ridiculous it was that they obviously didn't do that. But then, like over the course of like a day and a half, it was just like multiple sources in Panjshir are confirming Pakistani jets have and drones have done this activity. And then I thought to myself, I was like, you know what, Ahmed-waleed, maybe you're the problem. Maybe you shouldn't dismiss everything just because of your biases. So I actually messaged the friend and I was like, am I going crazy or is the world going crazy? Right? Like, has this happened? So point is that yeah, fake news is something that even I, who criticize it a lot, at one stage I was sort of looking at myself and I was thinking, are we is is it really can it really go to this extent? But yeah, it's the Pakistani drones and the Pakistani invasion and the Lahori Karai found in the rations of Pakistani soldiers that had invaded Kashmir, and the Pakistani, Dil Pakistan that was found in the MP3s in Panjshir. Immense stuff. But what the most, Ahmed Zia Massoud wrote this Facebook status, and it's the blue tick account, right? And he was basically saying something about, a foreign conspiracy and whatever. I believe this guy is sat in Islamabad whilst he's
Yes.
talking about. So yeah, the irony is insane.
Yes, we have a super chat from Lean Out the Ride. Uh, 55 Norwegian krona. Thank you very much. May Allah bless you guys. May Allah bless you. Uh, do you know the best place to donate to the needy in Afghanistan? Now, my personal policy is that I don't recommend any specific charity for everyone. I have my first and foremost advice is always do your own research, find the charity people that you know and trust, and donate. I personally donate to Infaq Foundation, which is a charity created here in the Netherlands, and they distribute food in Kabul, Kandahar, Kunar, different parts of the country. And there are other charities like Lasniwe and
I
many
was just
more.
going to mention them.
Yeah. So if you look around, especially if you ask around on Twitter, there are quite a lot of people who have charities that have been operational for years. So not something just popped out yesterday, a GoFundMe page or something like that, but like actual organizations who have their volunteers, they have their own network, and they have provided services for years. Try to focus on those charities and donate to those, because then you know that they are professionals and they know what they're doing. So that's my personal policy, but I wouldn't say to you you should donate to this or that charity, because at the end of the day we all have to make that decision for ourselves which charity is more suitable for the kind of donation you want to make. Guys, we have to talk about fall of Panjshir. So first of all, Ahmed-waleed Kakar, when whole of Afghanistan was surrounded, was basically taken over by the Taliban, how long did you expect that the resistance in Panjshir is going to last?
Uh, so, so I, it's a difficult one to answer. I basically knew that the Okay, there's one thing I want to say here, right? And maybe I'm right, and maybe I'm wrong. Okay, I don't believe the Panjshir saga is fully over, right? Because there are, up until at least my own personal view, is that until the leaders of the rebellion are sort of caught or arrested or killed or whatever, but as long as we don't know where the leaders of this rebellion are, I don't really consider it to be over. I do believe that the province, it'll be very difficult to sort of pacify and secure it in its totality, even if the Taliban have been able to see sort of the major strategic nexuses. With regard to how long I thought it would take, um, I really don't have an answer to that. I didn't know how long it would take. And the reason for that is very simple. I knew that militarily the rebels didn't really stand a chance and that they were basically surrounded, whether it was from Takhar or whether it was from the crossings from Baghlan or so on and so forth. But the reason I didn't know how long it would take is because I didn't know how much weaponry the rebels had. So if you read the op-ed of Ahmad Massoud that you and I discussed together on the live stream where he basically beseeched the world for help, he said that he and his family and his uncles and so on and so forth had been keeping weapons and stashing them since his father's time, which meant that they broke the rules of DDR, the disarmament campaign launched by the US. So that's the claim that he was making. But then he also said, but it's not enough, right? So by the looks of it, by the fact that Panjshir collapsed within what 6 days, right? But
Technically, yes, yes.
but you know, it took about 6 days of concerted military action. By the looks of it, he was bluffing, and that was just sort of a way to indirectly show the Taliban, like, I can resist you, and I'm going to ask for even more help. By the looks of it, the fact that he can only last for 6 days either means that he doesn't have his father's military prowess, or he didn't have the weapons for it. So I didn't really have a judgment or an estimation as to how long it would take because whilst you and I have sources, how much weaponry Ahmad Massoud has is something that's difficult to gauge and determine. What did you say? What were you thinking?
Um, I have to draw you guys' attention to history. So, in the 1980s, the Soviet Union uh, did try to take Panjshir. There was a battle, but then the Soviet troops withdrew. And in the article written by ahmed-waleed Kakar on our website, it is detailed that Ahmad Shah Massoud, the father of Ahmad Massoud, had a secret deal with Soviet Union. He would allow their convoys to pass from the north of Afghanistan into the south and wage war against the south, but he would basically remain in Panjshir unharmed. And this created the myth that Panjshir is impenetrable, that it's so difficult to conquer Panjshir that even the Soviet Union couldn't do that. But that was just a myth.
And
And
there's a bit of a contradiction that needs to be mentioned here, right? So just as I mentioned, this issue of Pakistani drones and soldiers taking Panjshir. So obviously neither of these points are true, and the truth obviously lies somewhere in between. So on the one hand, we have Panjshir, the impenetrable, impregnable fortress that even the Red Army was defied by. On the other hand, we have Panjshir that was subdued with a couple of Pakistani drone strikes.
yeah,
So, so who, and I know there are Pakistanis watching here and someone's going to get defensive, but you know, who possesses the greater firepower? The
Soviet
Red
Union.
Army or
Yeah,
the
yeah.
Pakistani Army and Air Force, right? So on the one hand, the Soviet Union couldn't penetrate Panjshir. On the other hand, the Pakistani army did it, which is a massive contradiction. So
Yeah.
the truth is that they were able to sort of take Panjshir, sort of storm their way in, and then they'd come under attack and withdraw. Or there was sort of a mixture of political military skill used by Massoud Senior. I don't want to criticize him too much. I've criticized him enough, but I think we can sort of agree and assert that militarily the man was skilled, even if politically he made what we would say are very bad decisions. As a politician, as someone with diplomacy and military skills, he was able to preserve the safety or the independence or whatever you will of Panjshir. Um, but that obviously was not sort of a constant repelling of every single offensive that came. He would withdraw, he would come back, and so on and so forth. So that's why I say, even now, Panjshir, I wouldn't say is totally subdued and whatever. I still think we'll see sort of fighting and resistance and insurgency. To what extent it remains to be seen, because that depends on outside support as well. But you know that these two different points can't be reconciled. Either Panjshir gets subdued after a couple of Pakistani drone strikes, which means that it's, I don't know, more easily conquerable than many parts of Pashtunkhwa that the Pakistanis had to basically bombard their way into, or the Masud of the 80s myth is not true. But
But what do you think about the alleged genocide carried out in Panjshir in the last few days?
I mean, I haven't really seen any evidence of it, and we've spoken on this platform before about how Jamiat-e-Islami is basically a regionalist ethnic party. So Ustad Attar, who according to many is actually a Suleiman Khail from Logar originally, said that the Taliban's sort of blockading of Panjshir was a act of genocide against Tajiks. He was suspiciously quiet when the Taliban also blockaded and besieged Kandahar, which would mean that, according to the same logic, it was genocide against Pashtuns. Um, but there were tweets of Amrullah Saleh that the internet is cut whilst he was tweeting from his iPhone, and I didn't see firsthand or hear firsthand reports from journalists, but I heard from others that journalists had gone to the area and documented how there was safe passage. So, I mean, I would.
There is someone who we know who
Uh-huh.
was near Panjshir, and I think he even tried to enter Panjshir, but he was refused. I'm not going to mention his name,
Okay.
but he didn't say anything. He didn't write any articles about it. He didn't tweet about it. He did about protests in Kabul, etc. But it was very strange that this very famous journalist in Afghanistan goes all the way to the gates of Panjshir and then eventually doesn't write anything about it because maybe there wasn't much to be to be written about. Anyways, so Panjshir has fallen. There are no battle fronts anywhere in Afghanistan.
For
Basically,
the time being,
yeah.
like I said, you may. I don't know. Do you agree or disagree with me? I would say that there is still potential for there to remain some level of fighting in Panjshir. I don't think it's entirely
No,
over.
no, no. I think the whole valley is cleared out.
Okay.
There won't be any fighting.
So then, where did Ahmad Massoud go?
They flew away. They have fled. And you know, initially when we heard that Panjshir has fallen,
Hmm. You
uh,
mean the fake news?
yeah, yeah. Well, the
Okay.
fake news that needs to be contextualized. What basically happened on that day is for the first time, large number of Taliban entered the valley.
Okay.
That
So they
was
breached the
yes,
first lines.
that was then spread around the world as basically they've taken Panjshir, which was not true. But
Qassayish Muftshut,
yeah,
basically.
but the thing is, once you send in thousands of troops inside that valley and they come from all directions, it's basically over.
The conclusion is foregone,
Yeah,
basically.
and what we saw is Taliban uploaded those videos of those cannons, those Soviet cannons, like
Yeah.
there were loads of them. They have tanks, but I don't think that's all of the weaponry that is in Panjshir. I think they have uragans and katyushas, you know, those rocket launchers. All of those stuffs are buried under the hills in Panjshir, and they will eventually be dug out by the Taliban. But what I'm trying to say is that there is no active front of people who are willing to fight.
Hmm.
The leadership have all left the country. They're not organized. And most importantly, nobody, and I mean nobody, is supporting them. This is the most important factor that needs to be acknowledged.
So would you say it was wise on the Taliban's part to sort of, for them, neutralize the threat before it became bigger than it could potentially get?
You know, anyone who wants to dominate an entire country and rule over it, the logical step is to crush any kind of armed resistance. I
Hmm.
mean, if you read Niccolo Machiavelli about acquiring new principalities, those chapters, all the different matters that he discusses, he basically also makes the same similar point. I know I'm not good at summarizing book chapters, but basically he makes the same point that you have to basically annihilate them and make sure that you totally
They say, yeah,
dominate.
And on a side note, I think there's just an announcement here. We at the AFGHANEYE endorse The Prince by Niccolo Machiavelli. So, for everyone that is interested in political science, please do go and read what is basically the Bible of political science by Niccolo Machiavelli.
Yeah.
Sangad, there is good news. KJ Khan, our moderator, who comes on and off, is back. KJ Khan, you have, we've
Mm,
delegated
The
you
the
authority.
minister of defense of the Afghanai Emirate.
Exactly. KJ Khan, we've delegated you authority to deal with the live chat, secure it, and defend its integrity as and when you please, just because of the good track record you've demonstrated thus far. And now, before we get into the events of today or the statements of today, um, we've got
Wait,
about
we
139 people watching at the moment.
yeah.
That's what I can see, and only 56 likes. I did tell you guys I'm going to be more persistent since our comeback. So I'm expecting to see that like button go up. And once again, share it on your social medias because now we're moving on from Panjshir, which we've discussed at length
But
before and after its
But
fall.
we didn't talk about protests in Kabul. That
Protests
was
in
related
Kabul.
to Panjshir.
Yeah, it was. It was.
Yeah.
So, so yeah, protests. What did you make of the protests, Sangad?
Well, first the protest started in the night before. People in some parts of the Kabul residential areas, mainly people who are from either Shamali, northern, parts of Kabul. They were the first group of people who started protesting, just sporadically, spontaneously. And yesterday, and even day before yesterday, there was a lot being said by people online that we should use our ability to protest. But then when Panjshir collapsed and the whole drama surrounding collapse of Panjshir and how that was presented to the world as, okay, now there is no resistance anymore, that triggered more protests. And what I noticed is that, yes, there are like hundreds of people protesting, but there is something that you have to bear in mind is that everyone who has some experience using a camera, you should know that when you see a crowd of like 50 people and you stand 100 meters away and you record them, you just see 50 people, a small group of people. But if you stand very close to the protest and you record like 100 people or 200 people, but you're very close up, it looks like there are thousands of people protesting. So what you see is the clips that are being distributed on social media, most of them are close up. So you get the impression that thousands and thousands of people are protesting, but
I
that's not
believe the
true.
Al Jazeera correspondent, she said hundreds.
Yeah.
I asked my
Yeah,
cousin.
but Al Jazeera is now sort of toning it down a bit. They're not as they used to be like a couple of weeks ago. And
Yeah,
yeah,
I,
yeah,
I
yeah,
mean,
yeah.
I spoke to my cousin, and once again, everyone, don't come for me. You can come for my cousin. But I spoke to my cousin who lives in Kabul, and he was like, "Yeah, this is just all of the people that the West basically raised and basically fed for the last 20 years, and so on and so forth." And I asked him, I was like, "How many people is it roughly?" And he said he's like, maybe 1 or 2,000. So I was like, fair enough. But then Al Jazeera said a couple of hundred. But it's difficult to see. I mean, the thing is that with today's protest, or rather, today's protest, because right now is not today in Afghanistan, it seems that a lot of it was motivated this time not by women's rights or perceived violation of women's rights, but we kept hearing Marg Bar Pakistan.
Yeah.
And if you're on Twitter, we actually saw videos of Star General Mubin Khan, who is basically the Taliban, the closest the Taliban can get to a social media celebrity. He was engaging with these protesters who were
He's
basically shouting
he's
at him that,
basically the Taliban version of Ben Shapiro.
yeah, basically. And so he was basically saying that he was telling one of the women, like, I wouldn't sell, a strand of your hair to Pakistan. So it seems that it was motivated by antipathy toward Pakistan. And now we ask, what is that antipathy um, triggered by? Well, I mean, we obviously know that Pakistan's role in Afghanistan, or what is seen to be a duplicitous role in Afghanistan, has obviously ostracized many Afghans. But it seems that the trigger cause over here are two things. Is what's it called? That there are two things here. First of all, is that the ISI chief's visit. Second of all, is the fact that there are, apparently these drones that are bombarding Panjshir. So that's basically what today's protests seem to have been triggered by, and unfortunately, and I say unfortunately because of the protesters, obviously, the people they're protesting against don't really have any sense of crowd control or riot gear or tear gas. So the only thing, when they get desperate and they panic, shots get fired, because I believe they were close to Arg, weren't they, Sangir?
Yeah, they were trying to go and protest in front of ARC, and that's when the Taliban started shooting. But that's the thing. See, here's the issue: people have the right to protest, whether it's Taliban government or any other government. They should be able to protest. Uh, However, what is not in place is any laws, any regulations. There are
Well, I mean, we got the first step of that, arguably,
yeah,
and we'll get to that in a bit. But
yeah,
the first step of that was today.
yeah,
Um,
yeah. So people, if they want to protest in front of ARC, like in any other normal society in a normal government, you have to ask permission, or you have to notify him, and you have to tell them we're going to protest there and there with so many people.
mhm.
When that's not in place, and just you see randomly people just marching in the streets and shouting and screaming, then obviously you get riots. So I was actually surprised that there was no riot. Okay, I was actually surprised that there were like two people injured or killed because of the violence today. And obviously, even if a person gets injured, that's too much. But
Mhm.
I was surprised that it went
It
so
didn't
quiet.
escalate
Yeah, it didn't
further.
escalate, and that may be because either the Taliban were very repressive, or maybe the protest wasn't as big and as violent and as chaotic as we saw in those short clips on TV and
Yeah,
social media. So yes, okay. At the end of the day, I hope that Taliban continue to allow people to protest. Okay,
yeah,
because it gives these people some sort of feeling that they can vent, and that's necessary. People need to be able to feel like they were being heard. But I hope that it remains non-violent. But
yeah.
okay,
Would you say that the combination, like, because we know that the Taliban, like the guys on the ground, are basically very much almost micromanaged by their seniors, who don't want them to do anything that could reflect badly. So, do you
yes.
think that the combination of, let's say, international media attention, cameras, belligerent protesters, being scared of doing something wrong, do you think this kind of makes them panic and is leading to a dysfunctional system?
No, I think that actually forces them to
Uh-huh.
adapt and become a
Okay.
functional state. Okay?
Okay.
See, governments derive their legitimacy from the people they govern. Okay?
Mhm.
And if they don't want to, if the Taliban don't want to end up like they were in the late 90s, they
They
have
have
to,
to allow this,
yes,
basically.
they have to allow this, and they have to accept criticism. They have to
Yeah.
accept when people are angry and frustrated, and they have to let those people know that, okay, we heard you. Now we're going to do this, and now we're going to do that. Which
Yeah.
brings us to the main topic of today's discussion.
There's just
The
another point I want to just to add on to
Yeah,
that. I think it would be, they have to realize that a lot of the support that they gained I don't want to say most of it, much of the support they gained, a large amount, was based on an antipathy toward American occupation and its minions. And now that those two things are gone, right, that common denominator with a lot of its support base is gone. And that's obviously totally normal, but they can't take for granted that reality. So they need to understand that people that previously agreed with them, people that previously defended them, so on and so forth, will not necessarily do so anymore because that initial glue is gone. And obviously, that disagreement is healthy. It's welcome. It's what allows societies to flourish in a sort of a sense, right? Healthy civil disagreement. And yeah, I totally concur with your statements. They need to understand that and accept it for what it is. But in any case, that leads us onto our next point. So, would you agree with me, Sangar, that since that live stream on that day, I believe it was a Sunday, right? Zautanastu, uh, and sorry, on that Sunday, you and I were sat on the AFGHANEYE live stream, and we basically found out that President Ghani, or the then President Ghani, had fled, right? And up until today, we kept hearing that a new government will be announced and sort of an interim setup will be announced, so on and so forth. Would you agree with me that from that day up until now, were the last, let's say, 2 to 3 weeks of Ashraf Ghani's republic in the institutional sense?
No, because most institutions were
Or
closed.
would,
There were
was
no
was the
services.
republic, was it not the republic that was still living on in some shadow of its former self?
No, no, I wouldn't even say that. It was
So you
just a
wouldn't.
vacuum. It was a vacuum.
Okay. Okay, fair enough. But in any case, now we don't have a vacuum. Would you
Yes.
agree with that? Now we have interim setup. Now, what was prominent about today's announcement by Zabiullah Mujahid, who is now, according to his own statement, um, he's now the deputy to the Minister of Culture and Information, right? But what was noticeable about today's announcement that he made was that a lot of the cabinet seats were not allocated to people, and he said that there were further appointments to be made, and this was just sort of the bread and butter of governance, where the major cabinet posts were to be allocated. Now, according to that statement, obviously he went, and this is the funny thing. Like, if you pay attention to it, he went from being the spokesperson of an insurgent organization to now being the deputy cultural and information minister. I'm still sort of wrapping my head around that, right? Because that change was formalized today. But in any case, Sangar, what did you? There's been a lot of there's been a strong reaction to today's announcement. We've obviously on Twitter, where a lot of these Taliban accounts are sort of seen a lot of praise, happiness, optimism, and on other sides, we've seen a variety of criticism going from a lack of ethnic diversity to a lack of political diversity to a lack of gender diversity. What do you say? What's your verdict?
I would say that, in my opinion, people are entitled and they're right to criticize this Taliban government, because obviously it consists entirely out of Taliban leaders. Okay,
Mhm.
so much about the inclusivity that we heard is
Yeah,
not
I don't
there.
know. I don't
Yeah,
know what inclusivity they were talking
yeah.
about,
There
lad.
is there is one Uzbek and there are two Tajiks and
I think three target, but yeah,
three.
the,
Yeah,
the
yeah.
point still stands. Yeah,
Yeah, so yeah, although there is some diversity, there are Nurzais and there are
there's
Ghaljais.
diversity
Yeah,
amongst the
there's
Pashtuns.
there are some from Loya Paktia, so in that respect, there's diversity. But no, I would say most of the criticism is justified. But in my opinion, you can't expect Taliban to take over a country and then within weeks uh, already decide which other parties and entities can present ministers. Like, do you honestly think that people in Afghanistan will sit and accept that Abdullah becomes prime minister now, or
I
Ashraf
mean, to
Ghani
be fair,
becomes prime minister?
I wouldn't, you know what? I know I'm going to get some heat for this, but I wouldn't mind Abdullah. Now, why? I know from personal sort of eyewitnesses that whilst the chief executive, he was shopping at Valentino in Knightsbridge in London. I know all of that, right? I'm not
Yeah,
defending
yeah,
the corruption or anything, but I feel that in terms of the international aspect of it, you need familiar
yeah.
faces, right?
He's politically very savvy. Okay,
Exactly. I
he and
agree.
Karzai, they are very, very savvy
And
chaps.
for the national interest,
Yeah,
I would say that the foreign ministry, I'm going to go out on a limb here, and a lot of people that like Amir Khan Muttaqi here are going to be like, how dare you, right? But I would say, based on the fact that he's chummy with the international community, he knows English and he likes his suits and all of that kind of stuff. He ticks the international community's boxes are ridiculous, but he ticks them. Okay.
yes.
Based on that alone, I would say, fine, you know what? Cut his salary, give him $1,000 a month and whatever. But now, where we need him, where we need as a country to use him, I would say, you know what? Use him. But that's,
I would
you know,
disagree. I would disagree. I would say this guy, when he was in power, he would appoint as ambassadors all people from Panjshir, like literally in every country.
I'm aware.
There was ambassador from Panjshir. Like even
I'm aware.
an illiterate guy from Panjshir became a ambassador. So for that
But
reason,
then,
I
but
think that
then,
that wouldn't be a wise
could
decision.
could that not be countered? Could that not be countered with, yeah, but the Taliban just did the same thing?
Well, the Taliban ministers are not illiterate. That's
Yeah,
a huge
they're
difference.
not. But yeah, but you know, according to many Afghans, if you don't wear a suit, you're illiterate. But
Yeah,
in any case, no. But I would say, like, look, appoint Abdullah as the foreign minister under supervision or restriction to make sure he doesn't get up to his old. And this isn't something that should be considered a reward for Abdullah. This is the time where you use someone from the previous regime to now actually serve the country. But in any case, Sanger, why
let's.
don't you show us the brief graph we've got of the
Okay.
major ministries?
Yes. So, guys, can you read the names? Is it visible for you guys? Because our graphic designer genius Walid Kakar made this. Okay, so we have a graph. This is basically a breakdown of everyone who has been mentioned as a member of the cabinet or a deputy. So we
So
have,
at the top,
yes,
let's walk through it, right? So at the top we have, oh, by the way, you know what, Sangar? Can you show us the video that WhatsApp كي در لي ده كواليسه كنيسه كوالا خير ده
yeah,
راتواليسه ده سكندر كيرماني فيديو ده احمد الله وثيقه سر خبري كوي چاغه واي چه ده باده دزمج رسمینم ده امارات اسلامی افغانستان ده شا
yeah,
كاغه فيديو بلاي كواليسه چه مقصد ده نور ده ورشکارکو
Samada. Okay, guys, so what we are going to do is first watch a short clip where,
and this is the because the Taliban and have now announced the government. This is Ahmadullah Wasiq, who was who was the deputy to Amir Khan Muttaqi, who was the head of, we could say, the Taliban's cultural commission. Someone in the live chat is saying that my graph looks like a algorithm. I'm sorry, but yeah, that's the I just sort of made this just to illustrate to everyone, and it's the main sort of way in which I could do so. سنگار كوالي ساق فيديو تشكي كنيسة كوالي it's مشكلة نستا.
we have it. Okay, so here is
Okay.
the video.
So on the right, you see Ahmadullah Wasiq, the former deputy to the Cultural Commission of the Taliban's former leader, Amir Khan Muttaqi. So this is the guy we could say that was working in either information or misinformation or propaganda. Play it, Kasangar.
دولتهم وإذا أفغانستان إسلامي إمارات وي او قسم
بله د راتلونکي نظام به د افغانستان اسلامي امارت وي او امیرالمؤمنین به په خپل ځای باندې وي ټوله کابینه به او وزیران به د هغوی له لوري څخه رهبري کیږي.
And one final question. There's no women in the cabinet. What message do you think that sends out?
پورې د کابینې ټول غړي نه دي اعلان شوي، وروسته ځینې معاینتونه او بعضې وزارتونه هم پاتې دي، تر اوسه پورې دا ټول سرپرستان دي. وروسته به په دې کې فیصله کیږي. امید شته چې په دې کې نور خلک هم ځای شي.
What happens to the UN listed individuals? There are UN listed individuals as well.
Okay, well, if you didn't hear it from me, there was the guy at the end shouting that this is, well, he wasn't shouting, but he kept saying Ahmadullah Wasiq. So the question was that basically in this clip, Ahmadullah Wasiq confirmed that henceforth, in violation of the requests or the warnings of many countries, that the official name of the Afghan government right now, as of now, is the Islamic Emirate of Afghanistan, and the Amir will basically stay in his place, and all orders and all edicts will be issued from the office of the Amir. And obviously we know that Amir is a religious title. It sort of means commander, and it's short for Amir al-Mu'mineen, right? And then, as you guys heard in English, Sikandar Kirmani asked him about women, and he said that up until now, this cabinet that's been announced is not sort of permanent, and there are other deputy ministerships and minister positions that will need to be filled up. So now, if we look at the graph that I so kindly made for you guys, you see at the top of the food chain is Amir al-Mu'mineen Mawlawi Hibatullah Akhundzadeh. Now, he hasn't actually made himself known, in contrast to promises of Zabiullah Mujahid from about a week ago, in which he said Hibatullah would make his first appearance. The Amir has not come out and made his appearance. And it's understood for all intents and purposes that just as over the last couple of years, he's not going to take a micromanaging or direct role in the daily affairs of government. However, he'll sort of be the Amir who will exercise a veto and will have the ultimate say in a lot of these things. KJ Khan, we actually have someone in the live chat who I believe is a Christian proselytizer, who is, we could say, saying things that could be considered religiously defamatory. So if we could please mute him from the chat. But in any case, so we have the Amir there, and then we have the Prime Minister, Mawlawi Muhammad Hassan Akhund. Sangar, what do we know about him?
So Mawlawi Muhammad Hassan Akhund, basically former governor of Kandahar, who is one of the most prominent leaders from the original group of Taliban who rose up against warlords in Kandahar in 1994. Someone who has always been part of the leadership council of the Taliban in the last 20 years. And for the most part, people didn't know where he is and what he looks like, because obviously there are pictures of him when he was young. He traveled abroad. He was photographed by Pakistani journalists, I think, when he visited Pakistan during an official visit. Back then, his beard was brownish, so he was a lot younger. And what we know is that within the Taliban movement, he is considered as one of the most influential and most powerful figures. So it makes sense that he is now the prime minister of Afghanistan from a Taliban perspective. However, what I would say that is sort of problematic is that he's now the prime minister, while outside the Taliban movement, most people practically have no idea who he is. They have never seen him. I'll show you his picture. This is his picture now. This is a current picture of Mullah Muhammad Hassan Akhund. And this man is going to lead the government in Afghanistan. However, I have been told that he is of the opinion that photography and videography of human beings is haram, which means that he will never appear in front of cameras. Like him, there are other members of this cabinet.
I believe Mawlawi Hibatullah is also of a similar opinion.
Yes.
But I believe he lifted the restriction on it for sort of pragmatic political purposes. But I believe that he
It's
sort of thinks
basically
similar as well.
it's basically a matter of ikhtilaf within the
Yeah.
ahnaf. So
Yeah.
so there is a difference of opinion within the Hanafi school of thought. Some of them believe that it is permissible to use photography, videos, but some of them believe that it's a sin to make pictures of people. So they only allow pictures where it's absolutely necessary, like for documents. This looks like a passport picture, you know.
Yeah.
So you would see that they will allow only that, but nothing else. So I think it's quite a challenge to have head of state of Afghanistan, someone who will never appear in front of cameras, and we live in a digital age of mass media, multimedia, social media, and everything, and we see a man who is leading the government and he does not want to show his face. So I don't know what to make out of that.
I mean, I would agree with you, but at the same time, I would say that that's something that the Amir himself believes. Once again, I had a audio clip that was claiming to be the Amir from years ago, and it sounded like him. I don't know if he's changed his opinion, but yeah, I agree. And if once again, I'm not in a position to make religious judgments, but it's difficult to sort of in this day and age to have people at the head of government who basically are religiously opposed to cameras and video taking and photography and so on and so forth. But what's interesting about Maulawi Muhammad Hassan Akhund is that he was also the deputy prime minister to the first ever Taliban prime minister, who was Mullah Rabbani. And if you have been following sort of the conversations of the past days and weeks, it's been that allegedly Maulawi Hibatullah Akhundzada, or the Amir, let's just call him the Amir now, right? The Amir was essentially expected to stay in Kandahar whilst Mullah Bradar and other officials basically run the day-to-day government in Kabul. Well, in the 90s, we actually had a similar sort of Taliban government where Mullah Omar was in Kandahar and Mullah Rabbani ran the show for him in Kabul. So that is to be expected. But now here's the thing. We were all expecting that Mullah Bradar would be the prime minister, but he wasn't. What do you make of that, Sangar?
Yes, we heard so many things about a physical altercation between Paktiawal Taliban and Kandahari Taliban, about distribution of power in the next government, and we heard that even Mullah Bradar is physically injured because of the gun shots.
We heard that Anas Haqqani was physically, he was shot apparently, but then we saw pictures of him and it just seemed like he was vibing in Paktia.
Yeah, and
so he wasn't even in Kabul.
Yeah, around the same time, he also did those video clips inside Bagram prison. So you see, again, the fake news, like disastrous in Afghanistan. But what I think was most interesting is that Mullah Baradar was the face of the political commission of the Taliban movement for the last 2 years. He was their most senior figure who was engaging heads of state around the world. And now he is not the prime minister, but a deputy. So I would say that it sort of surprises a lot of people. Mm-hmm. I personally, I was sort of surprised as well, because I think that it would have made sense that he becomes the head of state. But apparently not. Apparently,
you mean the head of government?
Yes, the head of the government. Sorry, and apparently not. And why they have chosen Mullah Hassan instead of Mullah Baradar? I wouldn't know. Do you have any explanation for that?
Well, so here's the thing, Sangar. The fight between Paktiawal and Kandari Taliban, right? So allegedly, this is basically supposed to be between Mullah Baradar, who's a Kandari, and Siraj Haqqani, right? And then some people would say that, well, maybe, Maulawi Hassan is like the compromise figure because he's a religious scholar. But now here's the thing. Mullah Baradar is the deputy to Maulawi Hassan, okay? And if what we're told is true, Maulawi Hassan is 65 years of age, and he's not really the most politically astute of people, as in he's more of a religious sort of scholar than Mullah Baradar is, and Mullah Baradar is more of a politician than Maulawi Hassan is. But now here's the thing. In order to strike a balance between these two factions, right, it would make logical sense, right, that one of the Prime Minister's deputies would be Mullah Baradar, and the other one would be Siraj Haqqani, right? But that's not what we see. So,
furthermore, Mullah Baradar is a deputy of the Amir.
Exactly. Well, there we go. So
it's very interesting.
It's like a spider web where there's a lot going on here. But
because Mullah Hassan is not a deputy of the Amir.
No, he's not. But he's the prime minister. And there's another thing that I want to say. Traditionally, Sangar, in Afghanistan, what do we call? I mean, I don't want to say traditionally, but for as long as you and I have lived, what have we called prime minister?
Sadr Azam.
Sadr Azam, which is Arabic, right?
Yes.
But what did the Taliban call it?
Wazir al-Wuzara.
Rais al-Wuzara.
Oh yeah, Rais al-Wuzara.
Rais al-Wuzara, which is interesting.
Yes.
It's interesting because it's I don't want to say it's a neologism, but it's a new word. Like everyone can wrap their heads around it. But the reason they're using Rais al-Wuzara, firstly, is because it's more of a classical Islamic word for essentially what in English we would call the Grand Wazir of a Khalifa or an Amir or something. So they're basically repopularizing a term that is rather, in our part of the world, it's rather archaic. So for example, in Pakistan, they call the Prime Minister Wazir Azam, right? We call him Sadr Azam. What Rais al-Wazara is still used in the Arab world, but for us, it's more archaic and more reminiscent of sort of a religious sort of style of government, right? Did you notice that, or was I the only one?
I think that's very interesting. And there is also another very interesting aspect of having the Rais al-Wuzara Prime Minister, primo inter pares, as they say here in the Netherlands, because in the Netherlands we also have a Prime Minister who is basically the head of the Minister Council. He is not like above all ministers, like a totally different level of authority here in the Netherlands, which is very interesting that the Taliban now have a very similar cabinet as the Netherlands. The prime minister is not someone who is in level of authority. So that provides some sort of context to what kind of government they have in mind. It's very archaic and at the same time similar to very modern states like, for instance, the Netherlands.
It shows, it's a very good indication, for example, as to what period of history they sort of look towards in terms of just sort of their inspiration in a sense, right? So, for example, if you know your Afghan history, Amir Sher Ali Khan in the mid-19th century to late 19th century was the first one to sort of form, we could say, a formal cabinet, okay? And do you know what he called the prime minister?
What?
Loy Mukhtar.
Loy Mukhtar.
Okay?
I didn't know that.
So Amir Sher Ali was, we could say, the first modernizer in the sense of sort of modernizing government, but at the same time, he was also quite big on promoting Pashto words or this sort of labels for these things. So I believe things like Tsaranwal and all of these things came about during his time as well. So it shows that the Taliban are actually they're throwing it back further. And so just further information on Mawlawi Hassan Akhund. He is, I believe, a Nurzeh from the area in and around Panjwai. Now we've got Mullah Abdul Ghani Bradar Akhund. And Mullah Abdul Ghani Bradar is an interesting one, right? So just before we go and dissect, actually, you know what? Let's dissect first and then we'll draw conclusions and evaluations. So Mullah Abdul Ghani Bradar Akhund, if you've read Abdul Hayy Mutmain's book, he fought for Harakat Inqilab Islami, which is like a traditional, more rural-based mujahideen kind of organization. It wasn't explicitly pro-monarchist, but at the same time, it wasn't ideologically, religiously opposed to the reinstitution of the monarchy. It was sort of more concerned with not trying to enforce certain things, especially in the Pashtun tribal belt, but more sort of concerned with just sort of rural Islam that was being reformed according to what Deobandi Madaris would consider to be proper. Mullah Abdul Ghani Bradar fought under that banner, right? Now in 1994, we could say, Sangar, Mullah Bradar almost personifies the Taliban. Mullah Bradar personifies the Taliban. Now, why do I make that statement? He was a co-founder of the Taliban. He was a very important military commander of the Taliban. I believe he was also present when they burnt my village in Shamali to the ground. On the eve of the American invasion in 2001, he was the deputy the deputy defense minister. The defense minister was Mullah Ubaidullah Akhund, who was Ala Kozay, I believe, from Arghandab, right? Mullah Abdul Ghani Bradar spearheaded, this is the man himself, he spearheaded the insurgency after 2001. In 2010, he was arrested, but in Karachi in Pakistan, in terms busy in recruiting and raising funds and so on and so forth. For 8 years, he was imprisoned by the ISI. If you speak to the Taliban, they'll say that the ISI prisons are far worse than Bagram and the American prisons. He was released upon the insistence of the United States to negotiate a withdrawal. He was the one that, according to American sources, basically really put speed into the withdrawal and the negotiations and so on and so forth. So this guy's life, almost in a sense, is kind of analogous to the Taliban's. Would you not agree, Sangar?
Yes, and I think it's also very interesting that the Americans insisted that he is released from prison.
Because they knew, this is another thing. In recent months, we sort of saw these claims of the political and the military divisions between the Taliban. But now here's the thing, Mullah Bradar is now decidedly political, right? But he commands huge respect and prestige amongst the rank and file, not just because he was himself a military commander, but also because he was imprisoned and because he gained what the rank and file would consider the Taliban a political victory. So this man, who is a deputy to the Amir, is also in this new government the deputy to the Rais al-Wazara. Now, we've also got the second deputy to the Rais al-Wazara, who is Mawlawi Abdul Salam Hanafi, who is an Uzbek, from Samangan. He is a Mawlawi. He was with the Taliban and in charge of sort of administrative stuff during their first emirate. So this is an interesting appointment and it's we could say on a personal level for Abdul Salam Hanafi, it is a massive achievement to basically be given the same rank as that of Mullah Bradar Akhund. Would you agree with what would you make of it?
I would say that Abdul Salam Hanafi is, he was a teacher.
Okay.
So if you know a little bit about his history, he was a teacher in his youth, and he is not just a regular Mawlawi. He has actually a lot of prestige among scholars from his region, etc. So it makes sense that they have selected a senior scholar to be a deputy, and plus the fact that he's from the north of Afghanistan, he is ethnically Uzbek, he speaks Uzbeki, like he addresses.
I think we're probably going to need to learn that language now,
I know a little bit. I think
Okay.
if I spend some more time in Samangan or anything, that will.
Inshallah,
Yeah, yeah.
inshallah.
Because
Maybe one day you can teach me.
yeah, I've spent some time in Tashkent. I've been to Samangan, so I've picked up little, but I forgot a lot. But he addressed Turkish media in his native tongue, basically. So it's like interesting, but.
Yeah.
That's something that I noticed about him. That aside from the fact that he is within the Taliban movement, he is a very prominent figure, and he is a scholar. He has a very long history of teaching and being known
Religious
as,
teaching, I'm
yes,
assuming.
yes. And aside from that, he speaks multiple languages. He's from a different ethnicity than most other Taliban leaders. So it makes sense that they have appointed him as a deputy, because this creates some sort of resemblance to an inclusive government, although it be it from the Taliban perspective. But yeah, interesting person. I would say I would like to interview him, get to know him, what kind of person he is, and
Maybe one day. Maybe one
inshallah,
day.
yeah. So
We've got our third, but here's the thing. Okay, so now we've got the profiles of two of the deputies to Rais al-Wazara. One of them is a senior scholar. One of them is a veteran commander. Now we go on to the Minister of Defense. Um, Dawn Hunter is asking, do you think it's a tokenized nomination? Wait, first of all, Sangar, you know what? Before I look at the questions, we need to talk about the super chats. Muhammad Ali Zia donated 10 euros. Thank you very much, Muhammad Ali. Humble Student donated $1. Thank you very much, Humble Student. Dawn Hunter asked a very good question. Do you think it's a tokenized nomination? Absolutely not. And the reason for that is that I think for the Taliban right now, their priority is allocating power to people that they trust, right? I don't think they look at this from an ethnic perspective. I'll explain why in a bit. I know a lot of people are going to be like, how the hell can you say that? But I'll get to that in a bit. I think the main thing for the Taliban is to put together a government and basically monopolize power politically, not ethnically. And they are basically distributing these seats in accordance with that, not in accordance with ethnicity, but in accordance with the people that they see as the most trustworthy. Now, Wazir Difa, the Minister of Defense, Mawlay Muhammad Yaqub Mujahid.
the son
What do we
of
have?
the
The
son
son
of
of. Do we want to? Let's let people guess who the son of who Mawlay Yaqub is the son of. Let's watch the super chat. Sorry, let's watch the live chat. My mistake. I just want to see if our viewers know who exactly we're talking about. Okay, we've got one answer. I'm not going to confirm if it was correct. Okay, 2, 3, 4, 5. Let's go to 10. 6, 7, 8. Okay, yeah, they all know. So this is the son of Mullah Omar, and he is the. So he's the head of the military commission, right? So he's basically, if you've been keeping up to date over the last couple of days, there were, when the first reports came out that Panjshir had been conquered, Sangar,
Yeah.
that fake news that you were circulating. But if you remember, it wasn't just you. The Taliban in Kabul also thought so, and they basically launched celebratory gunfire in which 17 people died. Now, Mullah Yaqub was the one that basically issued a very stern warning telling everyone that if you do that again, you will basically face consequences. Mullah Yaqub was also, I believe, a couple of months ago, basically telling people not to go into the houses of civilians to fight. So he's a very sort of, in a sense, I've noticed that his title isn't Mullah, it's Mawlawi. Now, for everyone that wants to know the difference, a Mawlawi is actually a religious title that's given to people that have studied and gained a certain level of certification. Like Mawlawi Abdul Salam Hanafi. Mullah in the Taliban movement is basically just anyone. If I don't know, if Boris Johnson joined the Taliban,
Yeah.
you know, grew a beard, he'd be called Mullah Boris. But a Mawlawi is someone that, you know, has actually studied. So based on
In what they
Yaqub,
say is Loya Daura. So
okay,
the great circle. You have to finish the great circle. So
okay.
for guys, we don't have a picture of Mawlay Yaqub. This is his father, Mullah Muhammad Omar Mujahid. So if we ever see his face, it's very likely that he resembles his father.
And he's a young man as well. I believe
Yes.
he's about in his early 30s or just
Yes.
about in his late 20s. So he's basically it does seem that he does have a level of religious education.
Yes.
And he's obviously been the head of the military commission as well, which would, you know, we could make a logical inference there that he has some military experience. And I guess we could say he and Siraj Haqqani basically pioneered the strategy according to which the previous regime just basically fell within 11 days.
Yeah.
Would you say that was him or Siraj Haqqani, Sangar?
I don't know the details. I do think that basically you have the military faction within the Taliban movement, and you have the political faction, and then you have the leadership council. But the military faction, you have a lot of senior figures. You have Ibrahim Sadr, you have Abdul Qayyum Zakir, you have Mullah Yaqub, you have Sirajuddin Haqqani, and all of them obviously contributed to the whole insurgency strategy. And who was more influential in the last days, I wouldn't know that. I have no idea.
But what's interesting, and this is another point that I made as well with regard to Mullah Bradar as well, being both military and political, there isn't really a fine dividing line. For example, Sirajuddin Haqqani sits in the Rahbari Shura.
Yes.
He's Khalifa Saib, right?
Yes.
He's a political leader, but he's also very deeply involved in the military side of things as well.
Yeah.
Now, underneath Mullah Yaqub, we have Mullah Fazil Mazlum Yar, right? Who, if you got, Sangar, why don't you give us a so by the way,
I think you know more about him than me.
Just because, so we're going through the diversity stuff or the lack of it. So Maulwi Hassan Akhund is reported to be a Nurzay from Panjwai. Maulawi Hibatullah Akhundzada is also a Nurzay from Panjwai. Abdul Ghani Bradar is a Popalzay from, I believe, around Rozgan, just north of Kandahar, but in the Loy Kandahar area. Abdul Salam Hanafi is an Uzbek from Samangan. Mullah Omar and Mullah Yaqub are Hotek, and I believe they were from an area in Rozgan called Derawud. I've also heard that Mullah Omar was from Sangisar in Kandahar, but I'm not 100%
sure. I think he led a madrasa in Sangisar, but
okay. He was from Derawud.
Yeah.
Okay. Now Mullah Fazil Mazlum Yar is also, I don't want to say a co-founder because he wasn't really a political figure, but he was a major military commander of the Taliban during the late 90s. He fought, I believe he partook in the burning of my village in Shamali. I'm sorry, I just have to keep mentioning that because I'm obviously not too delighted that that happened. But as part of the scorched earth that the Taliban eventually resorted to, I believe it was he and Mullah Bradar that were there on the ground when that was implemented, and some of their fighters got out of control. Local people suffered immensely. Now Mullah Fazil was the one who actually surrendered Mazar-e-Sharif to Dostum in 2001. Dostum killed, as we know, his foot soldiers, about 2,000 of them, in an event that was called Dasht-e-Layli, where basically Taliban prisoners of war were put in containers and suffocated to death. Some of them were shot. There are numerous reports about it. Dostum, funnily enough, always denied that it happened. But just before the Taliban seized the whole country, he came back from Turkey to the north of Afghanistan. And Dostum was saying, this time, if I do something, they shouldn't complain. So basically confirming that that he did play a part in in the Dasht al-Ali massacre. Now, Mullah Fazil, as I mentioned, he is from Kandahar, and this bit is going to be a bit awkward because I mentioned the tribal background of the others. He he is a Kakar, but in any case, let's go to the next. Can we go back to the? So he was released from Guantanamo as part of the Bo Bergdahl exchange of the. He's part of what is known as the Guantanamo Five, and yeah, he's been in Doha since 2014, I believe. Now, the Minister of Interior Affairs is Sirajuddin Haqqani. Sangar, why don't you explain to us who Sirajuddin Haqqani is and what he represents in the movement?
So Sirajuddin Haqqani is the son of Maulawi Jalaluddin Haqqani, who was a senior Mujahideen leader from Maulawi Yunus Khalis's party, the Hizb Islami party of Maulawi Yunus Khalis. Jalaluddin Haqqani obviously was one of the first jihadi leaders who started armed insurrection against the Dawood government in 1973. And Jalaluddin Haqqani is from Paktia, and he is Zadran, and basically
From Gardat district.
yeah, and he is like the most prominent. He was the most prominent jihadi leader from the Lower Paktia region. So he personified basically the Mujahideen leadership from that region. Obviously, there were other very significant figures from that area, like Saifullah Mansour and others.
The Omari family.
Yes, but I would say that Jalaluddin Haqqani is for Lower Paktia, like for instance, you would say something similar. Masood was for the people of Parwan and Panjshir, very important figure. So Sirajuddin Haqqani is I believe the oldest, most senior son of Jalaluddin Haqqani.
I'm not sure about the oldest, but now that given that 4 of his brothers died, he probably is the most senior.
And his other brothers, Badruddin Haqqani and a few others, they were killed in the last couple of years.
By the way, guys, shameless self-promo. I interviewed his youngest brother, Anas Haqqani, so on New Lines magazine. But yeah, that's that out of the way.
Yeah, and we have a picture that is shared by Pakistani journalist Tahir Khan, who claims that this is Sirajuddin Haqqani, also known as Khalifa. Why won't you explain what it means, Khalifa, and why they call him Khalifa?
Is it deputy?
No, Khalifa as in
Vice regent,
the follower, the one who
the one who comes behind, basically.
Yes.
It comes from the Arabic word khalf. But so basically,
so his father was the Maulawi, the senior commander, and he is Khalifa. He's the one.
That's actually it's interesting you mentioned. I'm glad you asked me that because in my interview with Anas Haqqani, he basically said that I asked Anas Haqqani, I was like, look, like you're really young to be on the negotiating team, and in Afghanistan everyone talks about age and respect and deference. Why are you on there? Is it because you're your father's son? And he said, yeah, well, our family needed to be present in these negotiations to show everyone that we're part of Imarat. And secondly, we are seen to be following our father's path. So I asked him, I was like, what is that your father's path according to you and according to other people? And he said, sacrifice, jihad, fighting for freedom, mediating, basically jirga and urf and all of these sorts of things. So whether or not you agree with Anas Haqqani, the reason his sons, Jalaluddin's sons, are prominent is because they are basically seen as the living embodiment of what Jalaluddin represented, at least to the Taliban rank and file and the leadership, as well as to the people of his region. There's been a lot of talk of the Haqqani network, and there are reports obviously that Jalaluddin had tensions with Mullah Omar during the first emirate, but that isn't something that's really unusual. Even assuming that it was the case, political parties and whatever all usually have political differences and so on and so forth. But despite the claims that there are armed altercations and gunshots fired in Kabul hotels between Kandari and Haqqani Taliban, they hold each other very, very much in high esteem. So there's no coincidence as to why Sirajuddin Haqqani occupies that position is called Khalifa Saib. And it's also because the Haqqanis, at least in terms of the attacks in urban areas like Kabul, in terms of their intelligence network that they gathered in Kabul, it was formidable. And those attacks, if you study warfare, you kind of have something called fourth generation warfare, which is kind of guerrilla warfare, where you're not actually aiming for you're not aiming for a military victory, but you're aiming for a political victory in the sense that you want to place the leaders of the opposite side under as much pressure as possible in order to force them to reverse course. Now, for the Taliban, that meant, amongst other things, it meant organizing high-profile urban attacks that would really cause a lot of damage in terms of reputation and prestige internationally. Now, the downside of those attacks, obviously, were that scores of civilians died in those. But that was the rationale that was basically followed. And that is the significance.
Yeah. So this picture was shared by Pakistani journalist Tahir Khan, who says that this is Sirajuddin Haqqani. And you can't really see his face because it's a very grainy picture. But something that I noticed is that he has this beard going this...
Just like his father.
Like his father and like his brothers.
Anas has that as well, yeah.
Yeah, so it's very common in Afghanistan that some men, their beard grows here, or from here downwards. So
mine grows there as well.
You too?
Yeah.
Well, so where is your beard here? You shave it.
I'm waiting for someone in the live chat to be like, you sell out. But it's because I've never shaved my beard in my life.
Yeah.
I've only shaved like once. So it's just it's like but if I shaved it, it would come from there as well.
Yeah, but so his face, like his eyes, his nose, his cheekbones, and his beard, they look very similar to Jalaluddin Haqqani, so that's why I think it would make sense that this is him. But again, he doesn't want to appear in pictures, in videos, so it is most likely that we will never see a picture of him. But now he is a cabinet minister.
Don't you think that's a problem? I tweeted this as well. The people of Afghanistan have a prime minister who doesn't want to be seen, have a defense minister who doesn't want to be seen, an interior minister who doesn't want to be seen. And especially with regard to the last two, they only know these people as fearsome military commanders that killed a lot of people, innocent and military, during the course of the last 20 years. Is that not a problem?
I would say it is a problem. As I mentioned earlier during the stream, that because we live in a day and age where it matters to people that they see who is in charge. But I'm going to say something really radical. You know what? Politicians, leaders around the world, they have so many photos taken of them, and they appear so often in front of cameras, and at the end of the day, they don't do really much. They just appear in front of cameras for photo ops and press conferences and whatnot. And especially if you compare that to the previous government, like if any of you guys know social media pages of government leaders from the previous regime, you would know that every single day, every government official, even from very low-ranking positions, they would do is every day post pictures. I've met so and so, and then you see them shaking hands with someone, sitting in those fancy chairs. Yes,
it's still giving me PTSD. Thinking about all of those
and they didn't do much. Nothing was being done. Nothing was being solved. But they were on TV. They were on social media every single day. So this is something totally different. We have guys who say, you know what? no pictures, no videos.
Can't we have like some sort of balance?
Yeah, but I would say I would demand that if they don't want to appear on pictures and videos, then we demand more action. They really need to
You know what the
do
thing
do
is, right?
something like
I remember I was talking to someone in Doha, right? And I was like, look, like, how can people trust you if they don't know what you look like? Like, for example, take Zabiullah Mujahid, right? We've only known what he looks like, right, for the last 3 weeks. Okay. Before that, bro, Sangar, do you remember people used to say Zabiullah Mujahid is a myth? It's a mythical character.
yeah,
Multiple people are called Zabiullah. We had the same thing about
yes,
Mullah Omar. Do
yes,
you remember? A lot of people said, "Oh, there's multiple Mullah Omars. There's one who's 5'6", there's one who's 6'6", there's one who has no eyes, there's one who has one eye, and there's
yeah,
one who just bandages it like he's a pirate, right?"
yeah,
So like, and then I remember I was told that Mawlawi Hibatullah hides himself because of security related reasons, and I was like, okay, you know what, fine, but now we're at the level, right, where these guys cannot continue acting like they're in an insurgency, right? You're no
exactly.
longer insurgents, right? You're
But
no longer commanders that are, fighting and trying to attack. Like, you are the government. People look up to you. People would like to see what you look like. And I know, there's a kind of an Islamic thing here as well where, we don't want publicity in the public eye and whatever. But if you don't want that, then just go and become a Malang. You should go and try become an aesthetic and basically just worship. Like, you're a politician now. Do you see what I'm saying?
yeah,
But those are my opinions. Next, and
we
so we
didn't
covered
mention Fasihuddin.
Fasihuddin. Why don't you
Yes.
talk about him, Sankar?
Okay, so Fasihuddin is
Qari
Qari
Fasihuddin.
Fasihuddin, who is an ethnic Tajik from Badakhshan. He is the chief of army staff. So
Loy Darastis.
yeah, he is the head of all armed forces in Afghanistan, and he was.
We actually heard rumors that he was killed in Panjshir.
Yes, yes, we heard that. So Fasihuddin was basically leading the military campaign in the north of Afghanistan. And in the last few months, as the Taliban basically took over the entire north and then tried to take the south, it was all him. He was doing that.
Fatih Shamal.
Yeah. So, and he led also the siege of Panjshir, and he took over Panjshir. So he is a very significant military figure, who is someone who started in his young age as a mujahid under his Jamiat Islami. And this brings us to a very interesting point, and that is that Taliban movement consists of many figures who are from different political factions. Like, they are originally from different factions. They didn't all just come from one political faction. It is an amalgamation of senior important figures from different sides, and the fact that he is a he is the head of the armed forces, it means that they have obviously rewarded him basically for his successful campaign in the north.
Okay, well, I have a question for you.
Yeah, just here is his picture. So Bilal Sarwari shared his picture. He said, sources tell me Fasihuddin, the notorious Taliban commander from Badakhshan, was killed in Panjshir. He had the central role in managing the Taliban insurgency in Badakhshan and greater northeastern Afghanistan. If true, it's a massive loss for the Taliban. I have no idea where these sources, where do they get this information from?
Perhaps it was the same sources that mistranslate Pashto clips for him, and the same sources encourage him to block people that correct him. Yeah.
Yeah, so this is Fasihuddin. he looks quite young. I would say he looks like
Yeah.
he's in late 40s.
Early 40s.
Yeah, and I can't help but notice that his guard has a magnificent pakul on his hand.
It's like a proper Waziristan style pakul there.
Yeah, but it is also very popular in Badakhshan. So Badakhshanis, they also wear the huge pakul, and I have two of these, but they are not as big as his. Like I have the zigzags,
Yeah.
but not as big as these. I would want to have a big one, like
I'm gonna buy one of them off you. one day.
inshallah. Yes.
Inshallah.
So this guy is going to lead the all armed forces if they go to war again. Would you think that that's even possible?
We will. I guess we would. I would say. I don't know, man. It's difficult to tell at this stage. But we'll see. We'll see.
Okay.
In any case, I want to ask you a question, right? Sadr Ibrahim and Abdul Qayyum Zakir are two men who we could say, with all respect to Fasihuddin, but Sadr Ibrahim and Abdul Qayyum Zakir are people who could easily qualify for this role of Chief of Army Staff, right?
Yes.
They weren't, because Abdul Qayyum Zakir, I believe, is an Alizé from Helmand and Helmand Kandar, and Sadr Ibrahim is an Ishaq-Zay, or it's the other way around. But they weren't picked for this role, despite the pivotal role they played in the insurgencies, right? Why Fasihuddin? What would you say?
People would say because he's a token Tajik. Yeah, that's the most convenient explanation.
Yeah.
To
Do you think
create
there is any
this-
other explanation, though?
I think I have an explanation. Just one
Okay,
second.
let's hear it.
Oh, just 1 second. Let me show you this. So, Mawlavi Abdul Haq Haqqani, who was a senior figure within the political commission of the Taliban, I mean the negotiating team. He was leading the negotiating team of Taliban in Doha. Abdul Haq Haqqani is a very prominent scholar, and he is also not selected as a minister. Okay.
You know, there's a live chat here that's raised a really good point. I read something. Sami Yousafzai, the journalist, said that Abdul Qayyum Zakir and Sadr Ibrahim were ignored because they were close to Iran, and Pakistan didn't want them in the new government or in a high position. What do you say to that, Sangan?
Yeah. So I have no idea what to say to that. What is this based on? How do they know this?
The ruminations of Sami Yousafzai.
Yeah, but because Sami Yousafzai, there's a lot of things that he has said. I have no idea, but honestly I can't comment on it. But here's the thing. So this is Abdul Haq Haqqani, who is the
Isn't that
chief.
Sheikh Abdul Hakim?
Yeah, sorry, Abdul Hakim Haqqani. I'm sorry for that. He's Abdul Hakim Haqqani, and he was the Taliban's chief of the justice. Okay, chief of justice, and he was the guy who basically wrote a
Chief
book.
negotiator as well.
Chief negotiator in Doha, yes, and he is the guy who wrote a very important book about how the Taliban should, their judiciary, how they should conduct themselves, what they should do. And within the Taliban movement, he is considered like not just a prominent scholar, but one of the most prominent scholars, because his book was even praised by Taqi Usmani. So
Who
this man,
seems like a fan.
yes, and he is not a minister. Okay, now what would be Sami Yousafzai's explanation for this? He's also too close to Iran. So the thing is, just because some people within the Taliban movement are very senior and very prominent, and they have a very extensive record of doing stuff like Sadr Ibrahim or Abdul Qayyum Zakir, it doesn't necessarily mean that they are going to be ministers in this government, because some other ministers are people who we have never heard of before. Okay? Like people who are even unknown to many Taliban people within the Taliban movement. They say, I don't know this man, I've never heard of him
Do
before.
you think it's possible that maybe this guy would become like Chief Justice or something of the sort?
That's quite possible. So that's why it is too early to call why Sadr Ibrahim is not Minister of Defense, why he is not Chief of the Armed Forces, or why Qayyum Zakir is not President. It's just too early. This is a caretaker cabinet. And these men who have been selected, obviously, for the Taliban Leadership Council, who are, in a sense, the organization who have appointed these people. I mean, they were not elected, okay? There were no elections in Afghanistan. So these guys were appointed by the Leadership Council. And the Leadership Council saw that it's appropriate to have them as the caretaker ministers in the current cabinet. And what's also very interesting is that aside from Fasihuddin and the people we already mentioned, we have Minister of Justice, Abdul Hakim Sharai, is not Abdul Hakim Haqqani. People confuse them, okay?
Abdul Hakim Sharai is also a high rank. He's I believe, he is an Ishaq Zay, and
Yeah.
he is also a scholarly personality. He's written books, and he was also responsible for the 2018 ceasefire. So he's sort of seen as pivotal in that sense as well. Now, next we have Minister of Foreign Affairs, Amir Khan Muttaqi. Sangar, what did you make of that? Well, let's give a background of Amir Khan Muttaqi first. So Amir Khan Muttaqi, sorry to disappoint everyone, but there is a reason for this. Amir Khan Muttaqi is a Sulaiman Khil, but now I don't know exactly which area he's from.
Helmand.
Now the reason, what did you say?
He's from Helmand.
He's from Helmand. I see.
They are Sulaiman Khel Kuchis who are based in Helmand.
Okay, do you know why I never bothered finding out where he is?
No.
Because Sulaiman Khel, they inhabit everywhere and nowhere at the same time.
Yeah.
So they're basically, so Sulaiman Khel are a massive Ghilji tribal or tribal group. They're a massive tribe. They have numerous sub-tribes. They're a nomadic group, and they stretch all the way, like Sangar said, from Helmand through Kandahar, Zabul, to an extent Orozgan,
Badghis, Farah,
Badghis, Paktia, Ghazni, and
Panjshir,
even traditionally they even used to migrate across the Durand line
Yes.
to Waziristan areas, to places like Banu and whatever, prior to the Durand line becoming sort of a hard boundary between the two states. So they're a massive tribal group, and the subgroups obviously involve Akal, Ahmed Zay, Jabbar Khair, like so on and so forth. But that's basic. So Amir Khan Muttaqi is once again, in terms of the political and military division, there is none. Amir Khan Muttaqi fought under Harakat. I believe he was the bodyguard of Mawlawi Muhammad Nabi Muhammadi, and he joined the Taliban in roughly in the mid to late 90s. Now, he's also been very prominent in the Leadership Council since about 2004. And recently, prior to the Taliban takeover, he was the head of Dawat-e-Irshad, which is like
propagation and
invitation and guidance committee, which is basically the cultural commission. He was actually pivotal in some of the negotiations and the surrenders that were achieved by the Taliban of the previous regime's forces. He was pivotal in that, and he was also very prominent in the unsuccessful negotiations with the forces of Ahmad Massoud and the resistance movement in Panjshir. But now he's foreign minister. Sangar pe Englisi peji ya na?
Wala naim khabar.
To the best of my knowledge, I don't know if he knows English. I would assume that he does to an extent. But now here's
He
the
was
thing.
also a spokesperson in the 1990s.
Okay, so
He would
Amir Khan
speak
Muttaqi.
to BBC Radio and etc.
So Amir Khan Muttaqi has a lengthy history in, we could say, PR, right? Communications and PR. And that's why I assume that he's been nominated or appointed as the acting foreign minister. But here's the problem. I personally feel that a lot of his skills could be better used at home, right? Because he has, and this isn't an issue of political allegiance and whatever, based purely on the fact that he was at the forefront of negotiating mass surrenders of previous regime forces, and he was at the forefront as well in co-opting Taliban rivals in the mid to late 90s. He's been there. So speaking and fighting to an extent, but speaking especially is something that we could say that he has a talent in, he's good at it, and he's got a demonstrated track record. I think that if you're a Taliban government aiming to get better public appeal, I would say that his talents are best utilized at home. Now his deputy is Sher Mohammad Abbas Stanekzai.
Yes, and Abbas Stanekzai was considered as the person who would most likely become the foreign minister, but apparently not. So Stanekzai is not the foreign minister, but Muttaqi. Now, who is Abbas Stanekzai? So let's get a good picture so that you can see it, because most people will probably see him in the news in the upcoming few months and years. Why don't you tell us a little bit about what you know about Stanekzai, Saib?
So Stanekzai is basically rumored amongst his detractors to have at one point been a communist, a khalqi, right? But and there's a reason for that. So Abbas Stanekzai is almost, you know what's interesting about the Taliban, Sangar, and I was on radio a couple of days ago as well, and they asked me, like, you know what, sociologically speaking, who are the Taliban? And that interview I posted today, but it was only about 5 minutes of about a 25-minute interview, which is fine. So they asked me, Sangar, who are the Taliban sociologically speaking? And, I went, the Taliban are this as a political movement founded in the 90s, so on and so forth. And whilst they are also Pashtun like the previous monarchies, they come from a different demographic in terms of tribal or economic background. These guys are mostly rural. They didn't really, well, they weren't, we could say, the beneficiaries of the previous monarchies, right? Now Abbas Stanekzai is an exception to that. Why do I say that? Because Abbas Stanekzai, one of the reasons he's called a Khalqi or a Parchame is that he, on the eve of the communist coup d'etat that killed President Dawood, he was in India in a military academy training, right? Which means that he obviously came up through the state school system, the state curriculum, went to military school, so on and so forth. And on top of that, in the previous regime, there was a positive discrimination in favor of Paktiawal. Okay, the monarchy used to specifically have sort of almost a quota for people, the tribes of Paktiya, to enroll in the army. There was a reason for that. First of all, I wouldn't say so much the whole warrior mountain image, but more so that since Nadir established his dynasty, the royal family appreciated that the tribes of Paktiya, their support was crucial in order for them to stay in power, because the tribes of Paktiya put them on the throne, right? So the fact that a non-Paktiawal can get into the army and go abroad to study means that he was obviously very talented or very well connected. Either way, we could say a beneficiary of the monarchical system. Now, contrary to his military training in India, he went back to Afghanistan. I'm not sure if he completed his studies. He went back and joined Sayaf's Ittihad-e-Islami, right? And then in the mid-90s, he joined the Taliban as well. But the fact of the matter, once again, the Taliban don't really have civilian politicians amongst them. All of their politicians are military men. And this guy, we could say, based on his military training, has undergone the most conventional military training we could understand relative to the movement. He was the deputy foreign minister of the Taliban in the mid to late 90s because he knew English, he knows English. And Christine Amanpour actually reposted the video interview she did of him, and a much younger Abbas Stanakzai was saying that women will be paid at home, but up until the situation is not sort of sorted, we're not going to allow women to work for the time being. And she was basically saying, what they're saying now sounds very familiar. I remember in the 90s as well, there's an interview of Abbas Stanakzai. He came to Germany and he basically said, look, we come out to the Afghan diaspora asking you guys, please help us. Let's rebuild the country. We're trying to put the country back on its feet. By and large, it seems the diaspora didn't listen, but the educated diaspora did go back after 2001 when it could make them a lot more money. But that's another topic for a different day. But in any case, Abbas Stanakzai was very prominent in the negotiating team. He was also the head of the political office after Sayed Tayyip Agha stepped down in about 2016 after Akhtar Mansour had, after news of Mullah Omar's death had come out in 2015. Sayed Tayyip Agha, who was basically Mullah Omar's closest confidant, felt betrayed and basically said, I no longer want to lead the political office. He stepped down and Abbas Stanakzai took over in his stead. Now, the thing with Abbas Stanakzai is that he's obviously militarily skilled. He's a diplomat, and because he's got a stern demeanor, we could say he's a good negotiator. At the same time, that has its downsides. So the reason, I would say, as a foreign minister, he's a bit too, I mean, personally, for my taste, I wouldn't mind him. But I know that for the Western world, they'd see a guy in a black turban that looks a bit bearded and has a deep voice and doesn't smile too much. They'd see him as terrifying. But in any case, based on his English language proficiency, I would say that he was, in my opinion, the guy who was most likely to be the foreign minister. But he's back to his previous role as deputy foreign minister, and I believe he's from Logar, but I don't know exactly where.
Yeah, he's from Logar. So here is another.
Do you know where he's from in Logar?
No, not exactly. But I want to show you guys a video clip that Ahmadullah Wasiq Sahib has shared recently. This is a clip of a gathering of Wasiq who... okay, maybe you can explain who Ahmadullah Wasiq is. We saw a clip of him earlier when he was being interviewed by Sikandar Kirmani. So here is a video he shared of a gathering of him with Qari Fasihudin. Let's hear what they are discussing.
Okay. Barely, bro. Can you show me the caption to the tweet so I can read? Oh, Sangar, apparently you're muted.
Okay, so
So basically he's saying that Qari Fasihuddin is not just a talented military man, but he is also a cultural personality. He visited our office at the Cultural Commission. And what did he say after that, Sangar?
And he advised the Cultural Commission او د مطالعې لپاره یې ښه ډیر کتابونه له ځان سره so basically this man, he came to the Cultural Commission and he gave them advice, and he took a big stack of books with him. What's interesting, so the video clip that you guys just saw, this is the office of the Cultural Commission of the Taliban. So just to get perspective of what it looks like, Okay, so this is the office. This is how they sit. Now, for anyone outside Afghanistan, they would say like, this looks really crazy. Why are they sitting on the floor like this? Now, you know, it may seem crazy to you, but most of people in Afghanistan, in rural Afghanistan, this is
Even in the cities.
yeah, even in cities, this is how they sit around on the floor. Okay, and this is also something that is unique, not unique to the Taliban. You see, because they're a very conservative religious movement, they try to preserve some aspects of Islamic ethics intact. For instance, they don't have the custom of putting someone on a throne, like big chair. This is the boss, and he's sitting on the big chair, and everyone else sits down. You know, that kind of hierarchy and those things. They don't believe in those things, which is actually a good thing. So they're very much more down to earth, literally down to earth. So yeah. So who we haven't mentioned yet?
We haven't mentioned Wazir Hajj Awqaf, and that is I put him there for a reason, because it's an interesting one.
Minister of Hajj and Awqaf. Okay, so the Minister of Hajj and Awqaf is who?
Nur Muhammad Saqib.
And do you know him? Who is Nur Muhammad Saqib?
Nur Muhammad Saqib, I believe, just give me a second. Right, I just want to make sure that I've got this correct. So, I'm just going to wait for Sangar to come back before I tell you guys who Nur Muhammad Saqib is or was. So, Nur Muhammad Saqib was the predecessor to Sheikh Abdul Hakim Shari'i, who was the current Minister of Justice, the acting Minister of Justice. Now, Nur Muhammad Saqib was the one who gave the fatwa for the bombing of the Buddhas of Bamyan. So, all together, bearing in mind there are obviously a lot of other names as well, but everything put together is that we could basically say, KJ Khan is saying, guys, I've got to go long day tomorrow. Thank you for hosting Waleed and Paikar. Thank you for being with us, KJ Khan, once again doing a stellar job. But in any case, Nur Muhammad Saqib was the one who basically gave the fatwa authorizing the destruction of the Buddhas of Bamyan. And we have the Wazarat Itlaat Farhang, the Ministry of Information and Culture, Khairullah Khairkhwa, who is, I don't actually know which tribe Nur Muhammad Saqib belongs to. Khairullah Khairkhwa belongs to Popelzai tribe, just like Mullah Brother. And he is from Kandahar as well, and he's also one of the Guantanamo 5 who were traded for the American soldier Bo Bergdahl in 2014. He is now the Minister of Culture and Information, and his deputy is Zabiullah Mujahid, as announced by Zabiullah Mujahid.
Can you maybe explain for our listeners what is Minister of Culture and Information? Because most countries in the world don't have a Ministry of Culture and Information.
So it's really good that you asked that, because there are a couple of things that we have to note here. Okay, there's actually a Wazarat Amr bil Ma'ruf wa Nahya anil Munkar, okay, which is the religious police in a sort of a sense, the ministry for enjoining good and preventing evil. Okay, the second thing that we have is Da'wat Irshad, okay, and we have Wazarat Itlaat Farhang. So Khan is asking, where is Zabiullah Mujahid from? I don't actually know. However,
he is actually from I think either Logar or Ghazni.
Okay, I was gonna say I think he's either from Logar Paktia Ghazni, and I believe he's from an Ahmedzai Korche background. But that's solely my assessment because of his the dialect, the slight sort of dialect, the giveaways in his Pashto.
Logari.
It's not, yeah, in a sense. It's almost like, you know, with Ahmadullah Wasiq, he speaks Southern Pashto, but I could tell that he was a Ghilji, and I thought he was from Zabul as well. And the reason for that is that he wouldn't say, for example, Wasiq wouldn't say da shanazam day, da shanazam da, right?
Yeah.
So in the day and the da, when it's a da, usually Ghilji coming from the east. But in any case, we basically have the Ministry of Culture and Information, the Ministry of Invitation and Guidance, and we have the Ministry for Enjoining Good and Protection of Evil, right?
Yeah.
We have three ministries or departments that are somewhat concerned with
Social.
morality and social norms and whatever. So for example, in Afghanistan, one of the history of Wazarat Itlaat Farhang, there's a interesting story here. A family friend was once telling me. So in about the 40s, 50s, when weather forecasting became a thing in Afghanistan, for example, the weather forecast would say tomorrow it will rain or it will snow in Kabul. But then I believe it was the Hazrat Saib Mujaddidi who exercised a chokehold on the justice system that objected to that on religious grounds. How could you, he asked, say that with such certainty? Only God knows whether the weather is going to be tomorrow. You're basically playing the role of God, and weather forecasts should not be allowed. And then Wazarat Itlaat Farhang said, okay, fine. We're going to do a weather forecast, and then we'll say at the end of it, Al-Ghayba indallah. Okay? The matters of the unseen ultimately belong to God, which is basically a way of saying only God knows what will happen. This is just our human estimate. You know what? Based on the BBC's weather forecasting, I think they should probably add the same thing as well, because their weather forecasts are terrible. But in any case, so these are the kinds of roles that this is the kind of role that Wazarat Itlaat Farhang has played before. You know the famous Nashnas song Zakho Sharabiyam, right?
I don't
Have you heard
know
that song?
No.
So it's a famous Nashnas song, Zakho Sharabiyam, which means
I
I
just-
am, after all, an alcoholic. Now, Wazarat Itlaat Farhang,
Yeah.
back in those days, tried to censor that and make it Zakho Sharbatiyam. Okay? So
What exactly
basically,
was that?
this I don't know exactly who it was in Wazarat Itlaat Farhang, but you hear these stories. But the point is that whilst we sort of laugh at these stories, the role of Wazarat Itlaat Farhang is information.
You need
obviously.
to explain what the difference is between Zakho Sharabiyam and Zakho
Okay.
Sharbatiyam.
So the song goes as following, right? Zakho Sharabiyam Sheikha Tirasara Jankre Barchi Azalidi Kashki Mad Zan Parangre. Okay, which means I am after all an alcoholic. Oh Sheikh, what is your problem with me? Basically, destiny has been predetermined and is eternal. If only you could make me as holy as yourself, right? So the point is that the beginning, the line at the beginning, which says that I am an alcoholic, is basically addressed to a religious authority, basically saying, I'm like a sinner, I can't really be reformed. What can I do? This is just the way I was made, right?
Yeah.
But then if you if you change that to Zakho Sharbatiyam, right?
Means I'm juicy.
It basically means I'm someone that's addicted to sherbet or juice, okay? So it turns the whole poem, the whole song on its head, because why the hell would the sheikh be opposed to you drinking juice, right? It's
too much sugar is not good for your health.
But so this is this is the thing. So this is the traditional role that even in the monarchical systems, the Ministry of Culture and Information used to try to play sort of somewhat a soft, restrictive role in order to guide sort of cultural production in a proper way. Right?
So you are basically saying that this ministry is, if we want to have Afghan voice, singing contest, we have to go to Mawlay Khairullah Khairullah and ask his permission.
Maybe, or maybe Mullah Khairullah Khairkhwa will have to go to Amr bil Maruf wa Nahy anil Munkar and stop their religious police from beating everyone up.
Ah,
So point is that we now have
it creates a very confusing situation.
exactly because we don't actually know what their jurisdictions are, their respective jurisdictions. You know, for example, the Defense Ministry and the Home Ministry traditionally have areas of overlapping interest, but now we have three ministries that are basically, in a sense, that overlap and are geared towards guiding social norms. Now, in and of itself,
and they haven't announced Ministry of Health, which is also weird.
Well, I mean, you know, like they said, this is just, you know, more appointments will be made. But the problem with this is that, first of all, you've got three ministries that are guiding social norms, right, with overlapping responsibilities that are not as of yet defined. Some of them, like Amr bil Ma'ruf wa Nahy anil Munkar, perhaps may have jurisdiction or the prerogative to exercise physical force. Okay? Now, obviously, the question is to what extent will they try to guide social norms? And a lot of people in the West are going to be like, yo, this sounds really authoritarian, whatever. We live in Britain, right? Over here, we have a sort of a national promotion of what we call British values, right?
Yeah.
So in every society, to some extent, you have an attempt by the government to foster a sort of a consciousness amongst its citizenry. We studied citizenship GCSE, where we learned about different things and how to be model citizens. So in and of itself, the whole cultural aspect to this is not anathema, right? It's not an anomaly.
Like,
however,
for instance, here in Europe now we have, they're saying that you should use your pronouns. They say that we're going to get rid of male and female toilets, and toilets should be gender neutral. So it's basically telling people how to behave, how to act, how to conduct themselves, but in a secular context.
Exactly. So the problem with this is that we now have three ministries doing this. Some of them may or may not use force, and you know, based on the Taliban's track record, maybe people didn't realize this before, but based on the Taliban's track record, this is something that will, to some extent, provoke anxiety. Now, by the way, guys, like I said, Wazarat Itlaat Farhang, Ministry of Information and Culture, has existed before. It existed in the previous regimes as well. It existed, I believe the communists basically forced Abdul Hayy Habibi to be their Minister of Information and Culture, and if he didn't do it, he would die, because that's how communists used to do things. But even the communists had this. Do you see what I'm saying? But the fact that you've got it now combined with Dawat-e-Irshad and Amr bil Ma'ruf, which will basically prevent evil or sin in the public sphere, it remains to be seen what exactly happens. But I mean, I speak for myself personally in that I don't think the state should play too much of a blunt role in engineering society to be more or less religious. I think that's the prerogative of sort of civil society, scholars, so on and so forth. The state can play, you know, a guiding role in the Afghan context, sure, but blunt force, I'm not really a fan of, but it remains to be seen.
Guys, so we have discussed the new cabinet ministers of the Taliban regime, what we know about their backgrounds, who they are, what kind of people they are, their short biographies. Obviously, this is a caretaker government, which means that it's temporary. We don't know for how long. We also don't know who the other ministers are going to be, like Ministry of Health Department, very important for Afghanistan. And what's going to happen next?
Could we then assume that the Minister of Health will just remain in his or her place?
Majrou, the one who, from the previous, to be honest, he's a very good man. Everybody started packing their bags and trying to go to Kabul airport, and he just stayed relaxed, and he just continued doing his job. So I hope he remains a minister, and that would be one minister from the previous regime who is still an acting minister in this caretaker cabinet. I would say that it would be very wise for Taliban to try to get more ministers from non-Taliban political entities, and that doesn't necessarily mean that they should get one of those thieves and crooks and kleptocrats.
As I was advocating.
Yes, I'm not in favor of that, but Afghanistan has thousands upon thousands very educated Afghans around the world, but a lot of people who are in Afghanistan. By the way, they don't have a minister for women's affairs, and I have a suggestion. So if the Taliban are right now watching, please consider having a woman as Minister of Women's Affairs, and I'm going to present to you none other than this person. Okay, so this is Farida Koche. She is from Balkh province in northern Afghanistan. She is a Koche, means a semi-nomadic person, and she used to work in women's affairs in her province under previous Taliban regime. And after 2001, she was interviewed by Pajwak news agency in Afghanistan. Last year she was interviewed. And she said that after 2001, those Tums men, they came, they killed her baby, and they took their possessions. But over the years, she basically became politically active, and she was a senator in the previous government. For years, she was a senator. She is an illiterate woman. She is very crude in her vocabulary and everything. So basically a Koche, typical semi-nomadic person from rural Afghanistan. But I mean, if they are going to have a minister for women's affairs, my suggestion is to have her as a minister. Because she I don't know, but I think it would be a funny situation to have.
But she's a Pashtun, so you can't have her because then she doesn't tick the diversity box.
But she's from Balkh. She's from North, so.
Yeah, that is true, to be honest.
Yeah.
But there's another thing here, right? A lot of Sangar, there's another point that I want to make here before we wrap this up, right? And that is the composition of this cabinet. So obviously you guys just saw the main ministries, sort of the core ministries that any government seeks to sort of use to govern the society in the country, right? Those are the Ministry of Defense, Interior, Foreign Ministry, etc., and so on and so forth. There are about 33 names on there. Now, a lot of those names, like you pointed out, Sangar, I didn't actually know of, and I hadn't actually heard of. There are other names, for example. So we have the acting minister of rural rehabilitation and development, Mullah Muhammad Yunus Akhundzadeh, who was briefly the military commission's head in around 2010. He fought in Kandahar and he fought in Orozgan. Now we have the acting minister of mines and petroleum, who was Mullah Muhammad Isa Akhund, who is a Popalzai, and he approved the famous Kandahar jailbreak in 2011. I think that was Sarposa prison. But then there are other ministers, for example, that we haven't actually heard much about, right? Now, here's the thing. I don't know a lot about these ministers, but it seems that the vast majority of these people are Pashtuns, right? Now, which is obviously disappointing for a lot of people because Taliban talked a lot about an inclusive government, but it doesn't look very inclusive. Now, Sangar, let me ask your opinion, and then I'll offer mine. Do you think this is ethnic hegemony?
I would say that it is almost unavoidable to have a Taliban government that isn't predominantly Pashtun. Okay?
Okay.
That's just the reality. However, as much as some people believe that this to be so, I don't believe that the Taliban are motivated primarily by ethnic supremacy, ideas. They're more focused on, seeing things from a very religious perspective. So it is very likely that more non-Pashtuns will eventually rise up and climb up the ranks within the Taliban movement. But that is still not the case. Like, yes, there are many very prominent figures from the north, from non-Pashtun ethnic groups in the Taliban movement, but it is predominantly still a very Pashtun movement, and which is also not surprising because Pashtuns are the majority in Afghanistan. It's the largest ethnic group. They are most widespread around the country. So if a political insurgency, an insurgency in a country where they fight for 20 years and they basically create their own government, and their government happens to be predominantly from one ethnic group, what else do you expect? Okay, it makes sense. But I don't think that they are driven by the idea that they are all Pashtuns and they're fighting for the Pashtun cause. That was Ashraf Ghani. Ashraf Ghani was the guy who basically...
At least he used that.
Yeah, he would, he would use that dog whistle. But he was trying to basically attract people who had this Pashtun supremacy ideas to support his presidency. And that's also one of the reasons why many non-Pashtuns in Afghanistan absolutely hated Ashraf Ghani. And during his 7 years, ethnic tensions in Afghanistan rose to unprecedented heights. So when you have that in your mind, when you know what happened in the last 7 years, and now you see a cabinet where almost all of them are Pashtun, it makes sense that a lot of people feel like, okay, again, we've had that fascist Ashraf Ghani, he's gone, and now he's replaced with another group where they basically, all of their cabinet ministers are Pashtun. It looks very bad. I think this will alienate a lot of people. A lot of people will be very angry. They will demand representation. Women demand representation. Non-Pashtuns like Tajiks, Uzbeks, Hazaras, Shiites, they all demand representation. And if the Taliban fail to get more non-Pashtuns in their in their cabinet, I foresee a lot of problems in Afghanistan. A lot of tensions.
I see. So the way that I see it, right, is the Taliban prioritized their own political cohesiveness and unity over any sort of national reconciliation or process or politics. Would you agree with that?
Exactly.
So with regard to the whole Pashtun, non-Pashtun thing, so if we look at the profile of, could we quickly go back to the slideshow that I made? Because I want to illustrate a point here.
Yes, let me get you that. So here we go.
So if we look at that, right, the Amir al-Mu'mineen, the Prime Minister, Abdul Ghani Bradar, right, Mullah Fazil, Abdul Hakim Shari'i, Amir Khan Muttaqi, Khairullah Khairkhwa. So wait, what? So how many of them are there? Actually, you know what? Forget counting it. But basically, everyone except Qari Fasihuddin on there. Everyone except Qari Fasihuddin and Zabiullah Mujahid on that list are from Taliban from the 90s. Okay? So
Basically, just to interrupt you, we received a 222 euros and 48 cents donation. Continue the good work, guys. The Feminist. Thank you very much, The Feminist. We really appreciate your support. This is very generous. Absolutely.
Is that just now
you.
that we received
Yes.
that? Okay, thank you very much, The Feminist. So basically, here we've got all of these names that we're seeing on here. Everyone except two of them were part of the 1990s Taliban. So here's the thing, right? What we can understand from this, I actually believe, Sangar, that Zabiullah Mujahid said something along these lines in the press conference. He said, whilst meritocracy and competence is important in our country, politics is predominant in its importance. And what I inferred from that are a couple of things, right? Well, primarily that it's almost like it slipped out of his mouth that in order to preserve their own ranks, right, in order to preserve their own unity, this was the system on which they agreed. Now, if you see it from their perspective, they're probably thinking, if we don't remain united in power, just as we remained united when we were in an insurgency, what good was it, right? We just become like the Mujahideen. So for the Taliban, as harsh as this sounds for the rest of the country, and it's obviously not something that the rest of us like, for the Taliban, national unity comes second to political unity for them, right? The way that they see it is that they are the vanguard. They are the people that freed the country, and now they're the country that are going to lead the country into its golden age, right? And if they don't remain united, they would figure, what good was it all for, right? So this is an attempt for the time being at political hegemony, right? Now, the fact that everyone is Pashtun here, like I said, everyone except two of the people there are from the 90s. Now, in the 90s, where did the Taliban come from? It came from Kandahar, Paktia, Ghazni, right? So it would make sense that the old guard would be handsomely represented in this, or their sons would be handsomely represented in this. They were handsomely rewarded in this new setup. And because the old guard generally came from the south and the southeast, it makes sense that they are now, it follows that they are now so prominent. But now here's the thing. With regard to Abdul Salam Hanafi and with regard to Qari Fasihuddin, I wouldn't say that these are token roles, okay? Why would I not say that, Sangar? Look, if you wanted to give an Uzbek, a Tajik, a Hazara a token role, you'd make them a minister of mines or something, right? You'd make them... No,
there's a lot of money in mines now, okay?
Okay, but the point that I'm making is that we've seen, we're ethnic minorities living in the West, right? And we've seen token politics being pursued by the previous regime of Ashraf Ghani, right? So it's very easy if the Taliban wanted, right? Minister of Roads, Minister of Civil Aviation, right? So, you could make an ethnic minority in charge of that. But who are the ethnic minorities in this setup, right? Maulawi Abdul Salam Hanafi, who is an Uzbek, in this new setup, is as important as Mullah Bradar. Do you see what I'm saying here? You can't say that a guy was given the same position as Mullah Bradar out of token ethnic politics. Would you agree with that?
I agree.
Is this position not too important for token politics? There's a reason why Hosna Jalil was never made anything important for Ashraf Ghani's government, right? The National Security Advisor and Amrullah Saleh and those guys were the real ministers of defense, right? Similarly, the chief of the army staff basically surpassed or superseded Sadr Ibrahim and Abdul Qayyum Zakir. Qari Fasihuddin superseded the two of those. Once again, that's a position that's, I would say it's too important to relegate it to ethnic politics. Do you see what I'm saying?
Yes.
So the inference that I would, just before I come to you, to conclude, the inference that I would make for this is that for the Taliban, it's about who they trust, right? It's about who they have the most faith in, irrespective of who that ethnicity belongs to, right? Now, obviously, the people that they do have the most faith in overwhelmingly tend to be people from the 90s who tend to be Pashtuns, right? But going forward, I think the Taliban are going to try cultivating sort of a new generation of people sympathetic toward their cause, which they will try to make more ethnically heterogeneous. Sorry,
Like you,
my
you,
mouth.
you see that right now. They just defeated the Panjshir resistance movement, and they appointed Qudratullah Panjshiri as the governor of Panjshir province. So it's a local,
Yeah, yeah,
someone
yeah.
from Panjshir.
And it's a very smart idea because the Massoud clan have demonstrated that they're not really willing for any sort of realistic compromise. Uh, and I think, in all honesty, just like many other parts of the country, including our own ethnicity, I think they have been held hostage, like many of us from all ethnicities, have been held hostage to leaders that claim or use our ethnicity or province or whatever to basically load up money for themselves whilst the rest of the country
Ghani did it
starves.
with our tribe, okay?
Yeah,
Ashraf
yeah, yeah.
Ghani, he said, I am Ashraf Ghani Ahmadzai. Before he even made himself a candidate, he lobbied around all these tribal councils of the Ahmadzai tribe, and he told him, yeah, I am one of you, and I am Ahmadzai, and we are one. And if I become president, then the
You guys are
yeah,
president with me.
yes, the Ahmadzai tribe will eventually have the glory and whatnot. And all these fools, these idiots from our tribe, these tribal leaders, all of them, they trusted that guy and they supported him. And basically, the entire council of the Ahmadzai tribe supported that criminal, basically disqualifying themselves from being representatives of one of the biggest tribes in Afghanistan. But that's how ethnic politics in Afghanistan reduces people, their identity, their culture, everything, to just being the donkeys that carry a political leader. That's
Basically,
it.
yeah.
Yeah.
So I think it's a very, very wise step for the Taliban. Just like I think a newer generation of Ahmadzai leadership should be cultivated, just to break it away from the toxic cycles of the past. I think it's a very good way in which the people of Panjshir can actually be represented by a newer generation of leadership whose reason for existence is not, well, 40 years ago, there was this commander who was really cool, and I'm now his son, and so on and so forth. And here's my problem with the Taliban's disproportionate Pashtunness as well. Whether we like it or not, Sengar, for a lot, even though to their credit, the Taliban have never said we represent Pashtuns, which is great, okay? But a lot of people, both inside and outside Afghanistan, will equivocate Talib with Pashtun, right? And they already do. Would you agree with that?
Yes, definitely.
So, and the Taliban are a political military organization who are obviously, they've made tons of mistakes so far, and they'll make, as a political organization comprised of fallible human beings, they'll make loads of mistakes going forward, right? Now, I don't want my ethnicity, I don't want me to be seen as equal to that. Do you see what I'm saying?
Yes.
If these guys are seen to embody Pashtuns, and like I said, they're a political party, they're going to make mistakes. I don't want that to be associated with me and my ethnicity because I am my own man. Do you see what I'm saying? And if they fail, right, if they fail, I don't want it to be, well, the Pashtuns failed. And if they succeed, I don't want it to be, oh, well, one ethnicity in Afghanistan succeeded because what good is that? Do you see what I'm saying? If we're not all winning, then none of us are winning.
And that's I think something that most Afghans who are rational beings and not total idiots, they would all appreciate that. The reality is that Afghanistan is a nation state, a result of historical events. We can't change our recent history or not so recent history, but here we are stuck with each other in this country, and with all the problems and all the suffering that we have seen in the last 40 years. And the solution is not to make the country even more volatile and unstable by trying to instigate ethnic groups against each other. Like, for instance, Ata Muhammad Noor, who has escaped the country when Mazar Sharif fell, he has now issued a statement, and he has basically said the exact same thing as Bismillah Muhammadi has said, that Afghanistan should be divided now. They are advocating for disintegration of Afghanistan while they have actually left Afghanistan, which is very typical. It's always people who are not in Afghanistan who are advocating for this kind of stuff.
And a lot of people are, I don't know, a lot of, if anyone is sympathizing, I'm obviously, sympathizes with that sentiment, I'm obviously opposed to it, because I'm actually from, I mean, on my paternal side, I'm from an area in which we are an ethnic minority, and we know what ethnic cleansing does. So just as I don't want my relatives to be ethnically cleansed from Shamali, I also don't want Farsi Wanan ethnic cleansed from Logar and Paktia. But this is, you know, this is ethnic politics 101. However, Sangar, that allegation is coming from Tajuddin Sarosh. And I would rather believe Bill Cosby saying that he didn't drug women over Tajuddin Sarosh. So are we sure that that Ustad Atta has actually said that?
Well, Tajuddin Sarosh, you are right. It is not 100% accurate what he's saying, but I would expect that someone like Ata Muhammad Noor would say something like that.
But yeah, that is basically, you know what, there's a question we got, and I'm going to answer it quickly over here. And it's a question that we got before the live stream. I'm going to take a stab at it myself, Sangar.
Yes.
What is the Taliban diversity and nationalism? What do diversity and uniformity mean to them? Do they believe in pure pan-Islamism and territorial nationalism? And my answer to that is that they're Afghan nationalists. I don't use the word nationalist in a pejorative sense, but rather I believe they are nationalists in the sense that they believe in the Afghan nation state as it is today, and they believe in national values that are based overwhelmingly on Sunni Islamic, you know, Sunni Islam, right? As well as a shared sort of cultural history and heritage amongst Afghans of all ethnicity. They have a pan-Islamic orientation, and in the 90s especially, that kind of clashed with their territorial sort of nationalist ethos. And the thing is that with regard to the lack of diversity amongst this cabinet, they don't see themselves as representing one ethnicity or province or tribe or anything of the sort. They see themselves as representing all Afghans, and that's why they would say that's why they fought in Badghis and in Faryab just as they fought in Paktia and in Khost. They don't really see themselves as restricted to that. With regard to diversity and uniformity, they don't really have a problem with diversity in the ethnic sense. They have a problem with diversity in the ideological sense. And that is obviously something that's not great, but it's a reality with which we have to work. But in terms of ethnicity and nationalism, they're very much all, we are all sort of Afghans in that sense. And we share this common history, culture, and values, right? And obviously that national identity, just like the Afghan national identity, is to a large extent, it's sort of formulated around a Pashtun core, right? That's a legacy of history, but they don't believe in sort of an ethnically deterministic or ideological perspective strictly stemming from ethnicity. So that is my answer to that question that we received.
Guys, we have a poll in the chat. Was this show informative and useful or not? 94% has voted yes. 6% has voted no.
We did better than Bashar al-Assad did in the Syrian elections.
Wow. Okay, guys, if you haven't voted yet, please vote in the chat. If you haven't liked the video.
Now we're doing as well as Saddam Hussein used to do in his elections.
Oh.
But yeah, so That is, but with regard to partition of the country, I mean, look, this is the thing. You remember that decentralization article I wrote? When they're in power, they want centralization. They like centralization. When they start to lose power, they want decentralization. When they get kicked, when they flee the country because they can't fight, then they want separatism. Basically, anything and everything has to be subordinated to them owning their own personal fiefdoms.
Yes, and that's very sad because ideas about how a state should be, the architecture of state, its functions, its everything about it is very interesting. It's an academic exercise, but in Afghanistan we don't see that discussion being led by academics, but by thugs like Bismillah Khan and Atta Mohammad Noor.
Who basically
Yeah.
sabotaged the building of the state right from the get-go.
Yeah, and plus we have some Western academics who most likely receive funding from these thugs, or we have some Afghan.
Many Western Western academics. So many of them are just there for hire.
Yeah, yeah, because you know your salary as a professor is not something that would make you super rich, so you have to, yeah, have another job on the side. But guys, thank you very much for being with us. As you can see, I'm exhausted. I woke up early. I was working all day until 8 p.m. In the evening, and then I came here, got ready, put on some makeup so that we can have a show. Thank you all for the super chats. Thank you for your attendance. Thank you for your active participation in the chat.
I'm not gonna thank anyone for the amount of likes we got, because
Yes.
I mean, come on, man. What is that? What is that?
Yeah.
Seriously. You know, it's
there
just
are more
like
than
that.
160 people in the chat, and we only have 148
I mean, if you guys
likes.
didn't like it, it's fine. You can dislike it, man. I don't mind. Just press one of the two buttons. But in any case, guys, that was the news as it was for today. We had to cover A Khan, £15 super chat. Hello from a British Pakistani Pashtun. I'm grateful for your work as it's truly enlightening. Can you tell us some charitable causes in Afghanistan where we can send our sadaqah, please? So Sangar answered, first of all, A Khan, thank you very much for the generous donation. I'm really glad and humbled that you found today's live stream to be enlightening. With regard to charitable causes in Afghanistan, Sangar, that was actually a question that we got at the beginning of the live stream as well. And Sangar mentioned the Infaq Foundation, as well as a charity called ahmed-waleed, which means holding hands, which is operated by a previous guest of ours on this podcast,
Mudassir Islami.
Mudassir Islami. So yeah, do check that out. And once again, thank you for the super chat. But in any case, guys, thank you very much for being with us today. If you do find our content to be sort of enlightening amidst all of like the swarm of headlines that we are inundated with, because the developments are coming out of Afghanistan quite quickly these days, and there's a lot of controversy, there are a lot of strong opinions about it. If you want to hear about it from two Afghans who go deep and dissect the different personalities, the different issues, the different events that are raised, then I mean, first of all, you could start by liking our video. It's not too much to ask for. But secondly, please share our content on your social media. Once again, we know that most of the people that watch and that are with us today, that are with us here today, sorry, even I'm tired. Most of the people that are with us today are not subscribers to our channel. So first of all, welcome and thank you for coming to our channel. Thank you for joining us. Secondly, just as you found us, we want other people to find us. And if other people find us, then maybe one day we'll be able to do content like this, not irregularly, but we can do this more regularly as a full-time job. So on that note, please share our content, subscribe to our YouTube channel, follow us on Twitter. And if you agree with our cause, and that is to provide an independent narrative or a counter narrative to Afghanistan in the swarm of global media that's compromised by political allegiances and dirty money, if you're opposed to all of these things and you want to support an independent platform, sometimes you may disagree with us, but if you agree that there needs to be an independent voice, then please consider becoming patrons on our Patreon, donating to us on PayPal, like the feminist quote very generously did earlier on, or via super chat. And up until then, wassalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah.
Wa alaikum assalam. Shah Rukh Khan, your tweet about how we Pakistani should. Shah Rukh Khan, I said Pakistani agitators. If you identify as a Pakistani agitator, then I can help you. If you're offended, yes, then so be it. Just don't be an agitator. Okay, guys, thank you very much for the voting in the poll. 95%. Thank you very much, and have a good evening. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah.